So, hello and welcome, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to you all, and welcome to this session Utilities Making Safe and Inclusive Sanitation a Reality. Our apologies and thanks for waiting a couple of minutes more. We had to ensure really everyone is visible, can be heard, and can share their presentation for this great session ahead. My name is Franziska Volk, and on behalf of the Congress host GWOPA at UN Habitat, I'm happy to send greetings from the UN campus in Bonn, Germany, to our worldwide Congress participants. So what is ahead of us in this session? We all know that the challenges that utilities are facing to make inclusive and safe sanitation a reality are numerous. But in the coming 2 hours and also in the follow-up discussion rooms afterwards, we will hear and see the concrete actions and the commitments from operators around the world to address and solve them. This session also aims at increasing the awareness and appreciation of sanitation-focused operator partnerships, so-called SWAPs. And we also have examples of such SWAPs from Palestine and Zambia in this session today. For your best event experience, I have 3 technical tips for you. First, the presentations will be in English, Spanish, and French. So on your right side, you will find live interpretation. In case it doesn't work out immediately, just reload the page or refresh, come back in and have a bit of patience, but it should work well. Second is participants chat that you also find on the right side. And you can join in with your email or your social media accounts. Lastly, you will find on the session page very below a feedback survey, which would help us a lot if you could fill that and give your feedback about the session afterwards. Before we start, let me quickly share one slide here. We are very happy and proud to feature a small launch today because GWOPA is launching a podcast series about water operators partnerships, and the name of the podcast is Swapcast. The very first episode is focused on sanitation-focused water operator partnerships and is called Swap It. We have really great guests in this episode from IWK Malaysia, Lusaka Water and Sanitation Company, and also RTI. We hope you enjoy listening in and you can take some off time from the screen as well. So without further ado, I would like to hand over to the moderator of the session. Let me see, am I sharing the wrong screen here? I would like to hand over to the moderator of the session, Dr. Barbara Kazimbaya-Senkwe, who is the Africa coordinator of USAID's WashFin program. And Barbara, thank you so much for you and your team in shaping the session, in organizing it, and the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Franziska, for that introduction. So just one small correction there. The names are correct. I'm Barbara Kazimbaya-Senkwe, but my title is actually Senior WASH Governance Advisor. I did start the activity as the Africa Coordinator, but then switched my role to focus more on the governance side of the sector. And I wanted to add to Franziska's tips on managing the technology. I struggled a bit to find where I could reduce the volume when we are doing translation. For some of you, I think it will be on your right, on the right hand, top right hand of the speaker. For mine, it is actually on the left. There's really 2 dots for you to reduce the volume. For some, it will be on the right, top right. For some, if your computer is similar to mine, it will probably be on the left bottom and not the top right. So let's hope that we can all participate. But the team is here. If you have any problems on the technology, please type in the chat and we'll try and make sure that we resolve any technical hitches that we might experience. So having said that, let's go straight into the discussion. We have quite some interesting speakers, as Franziska said there, and the session is organized in actually four different parts. We will begin with getting an overview. Why are we having this discussion about citywide inclusive sanitation in the context of war? Why is it important? And two presenters will help us to delve into that. And we will start with Mr. Bisi Beremi. He's a water, sanitation, and hygiene specialist with UNICEF and is based in New York. He has over 30 years of professional experience in the sector. He has managed several WASH projects at global, national, and subnational levels, including providing strategic technical leadership and guidance. And prior to working for UNICEF, Bisi has been working with a private engineering consulting firm responsible for design of urban water supply schemes in Nigeria. So he brings a lot of experience to the sector, and I'm happy to invite Bisi. Bisi will talk to us about addressing the urban sanitation challenge and accelerating progress. Bisi, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you so much. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're coming from. My name is Bisi Agbiremi, as I've been introduced, and I'm a water specialist based in New York. And what I just want to do is just to give us some overview in terms of what are the issues around urban sanitation. Before we go deep dive into all the other issues, I think it's good to know the challenges we are facing and how do we accelerate progress. I think that's what I will just try to do in the next couple of minutes as a way of setting the scene for a very robust discussion we are going to have. So if you can see my screen, I will continue. Now, let's look at where we are as far as urban sanitation is concerned. And while we have the SDG target of achieving universal access to sanitation, we can say that in urban areas, quite some progress is being made. As you can see from the screen, as far as 2020, about 62% of the urban population have what we call safely managed sanitation. And if in total, 3.6 billion people still lack safely managed sanitation services, both in rural and urban areas, right? While the situation in urban is better than rural, 38% of the urban population still lack safely managed sanitation. Are we on track? Definitely not. Even in urban areas, despite all the investment, despite all the efforts. And the risk is that by 2030, we will not reach, if we go at this progress, we will not reach that ambition of achieving universal access to sanitation. In terms of progress, only 21 countries are on track to achieve universal access to at least basic sanitation services in urban areas. There's uneven progress in regions. It depends from where you are coming from. In more countries are finding better than others. And in most importantly, even within countries, there are differences. And the poorest of the poor are often left out without services or poorer services. So for us, we have to work so hard to achieve the SDG target and eliminate inequalities. The rate of progress must move 5 times faster than what we are presently having in urban areas. So, and that's why, for me, I love this issue. And I think all of us hearing me today, we have a role to play to accelerate progress so that we can have universal access to sanitation by 2030. It's a lot of work, but we cannot do it. And because look at target audience, I'm just bringing this slide up to show that while we are trying to accelerate progress, we have to know what are we accelerating progress on. And looking at our target audience, the utility workers and what have you, what do we have? I know majorly most of our investments are on seaward sanitation systems, but things are changing. You and I know that in most of the cities, if we just close our eyes, in most of the cities, on the average, especially in the least developing world, about 20 to 30% of cities are covered by seaward system with a huge investment. So what happened to the rest of the population? So the results have shown that increasingly more people are using on-site sanitation services, right? And we have to start thinking of a mix of approaches that take care of both the population that are using sewage and non-sewage sanitation services. I think this is extremely very, very important. And as you can see, of course, in least developed countries, we have a large population, about 66% of the population in urban areas are using on-site non-sewage sanitation system. What does that mean to us in terms of planning, in terms of investment, if we are to actually achieve equitable access to urban sanitation? These are just some information I'm just putting out there for us to reflect very well when we start planning and investing and on urban sanitation. As we are struggling to accelerate progress, we have to consider all these results and all this information. Now, what are the issues? Probably for me, just to say the same for the questions I've said. What are the issues? There are a lot of challenges we know we face in urban sanitation. Most importantly, the issue of rapid urban population growth rate. As you and I know, the rate is rapidly increasing, and the rate of progress is not commensurate with the rate of population growth rate is not commensurate with the rate of progress, and that's where we have a lot of deficit. So we have to always think ahead of this if we are to ever achieve the target we set for ourselves. And the issue of lack of secure land tenure and space, especially for residents in former urban settlement. And this is something we struggle with. The unequal access to ineffective coverage of urban sanitation services. In urban areas, who are the ones we are serving? And that's another question we need to ask ourselves. Often, as I said earlier, 20% of the cities are served with the sewer system. These are the rich guys, the rich population. What happens to other areas that are not served? What happens to the informal settlement? What happens to the slums? Most often, we don't extend service to this group of population. And so for us, it's about equity. So for us to achieve equity, we have to think about both the rich and the poor. We have to have an approach, a system, services that takes care of both the rich and the poor. I think that's extremely very important. And the issue of monitoring itself. Now we are thinking about safely managed sanitation services. We don't have a robust monitoring system to even see how we are moving forward. The issue of political will is there in terms of the political will to fund planning and funding sanitation. In most cases, sanitation is not given that priority it deserves, right? So we need to ensure that we advocate to ensure that we have enhanced or increased political will, and of course, even increased capacity, right? That will really help us to increase our interventions in urban areas. And lastly, before I go to the next slide, we should not forget the impact of climate change. We should not forget it. So as we are moving along, we must think of climate resilient urban sanitation services in our planning, in our design, our service. That's extremely very, very important if we are to reach our target. Probably you know all this. This could be a familiar figures or picture we all see. This is very common in the least developed countries. Manual scavenger, manual empty. This is undignifying in 2021. But this is what we see in most of the cities. So what do we do with all these ones, right? And the issue of poor sanitation has devastating consequences. A lot of reports, a lot of research has shown the illness and disease. The issue of dignity, safety, and equality is a lot of issues around that. The financial cost to poor sanitation is huge. And of course, this disproportionately impacts the most vulnerable population, the poorest of the poor population, which we must always speak for. So these are just some of the tips I just want to share with you guys for us to think through especially when we are planning. We must plan holistically. We must include all segments of societies in our services, and we must ensure that we provide a service that takes care of everybody. Again, maybe some of us have seen this. It's not just about toilet. We are talking about sanitation service chain. We're talking about safety, right? For us to enjoy the outcome of urban sanitation services, safety becomes so important. Safety from the point of containment up to treatment and reuse. We must ensure safety along the line. Excreta, feces, shit as we call it, should not be exposed to human beings, neither to the environment. That is safety. So along the service chain, we must make sure that we put in system mechanism to ensure that safety. That is extremely very important. Safe sanitation for all requires addressing the risks at every step, from the toilet to contact containment, storage and treatment, to conveyance, to treatment, to end use and disposal. Safety precautions, safety factors must be incorporated in design. And I think that's extremely very important. I really want to end with my key messages because I know This is just just to set the scene for discussions. I know our colleagues, they already have a lot of powerful slides that they will show to you. But if I'm to end with my slides, it's just for us to tell us that the world is alarmingly off track to deliver universal access to safe sanitation by 2030. And all efforts are required to accelerate progress. Poor sanitation has devastating consequences, and this impacts more on the most vulnerable population. Sanitation is a public good. It provides benefit across society in improved health as well as economic and social development. We believe the governments have the political will to accelerate sanitation progress with proven and effective approaches which focus on meeting the needs of the poor and most marginalized urban sanitation, combining on-site and sewage systems. Accelerated progress can be achieved with good governance, appropriate financing mechanism, adequate and relevant capacity, appropriate data and information systems, and innovative approaches. So I will end there, and hopefully, I'm sure this will set the scene for our discussion. Thank you so much for your attention. Over to you, Barbara.
Thank you. Thank you very much, BC. I think you have set us off on the correct path. If you remind us, speakers, please leave your camera on as you are doing your presentation so people can see you. And I'm not going to try and summarize because BC did a good job of summarizing there, and it's brought us to a point where we are beginning to think, how do we overcome some of these challenges? And the city-wise inclusive sanitation has been put forward as one possible way because it brings together the different elements. You know, you can do sanitation without leaving the poor behind, without having to do sewer systems all over the place. So at this point, I'm excited to introduce Dr. Dennis Mwanza. He is the Senior Water, Sanitation and Hygiene Services Advisor for RTI. Dr. Mwanza is a well-known figure in the sector. He's been chief of party for two large USAID programs, WASH in Nigeria and SUWASA, which was an Africa-wide activity. He's worked as deputy director for Bill and Melinda Gates, leading their work on sanitation and the citywide inclusive sanitation in particular. He's worked as a managing director of Lusaka Water. So when we talk about WOOPS and WOPS, he's been there because he also served as the managing director for the Water Utility Partnership, which later became WOP. So we are very happy to have Dennis with us. And Dennis will be talking to us about utilities using citywide inclusive sanitation as a driver to achieve SDGs on sanitation, building on the work that BC has just highlighted there. Dennis Mwanza, you are very welcome.
Thank you so much, Barbara, and good morning to everyone, or good afternoon, wherever you may be. And thank you so much for that introductory remark. Mine is also a very brief point, just to share a few views on the matter that we have at the moment. And thank you so much, BC, for raising the issues and basically sharing with us what the situation is, reminding us the challenge that we have. Because though the statistics that you have shown us in terms of access to safely managed sanitation give us a grim picture, I'm sure that we can, with a strong will and and all the different facets coming together, we can certainly make much progress. I know that 2030 is very soon, but the target for us to reach there is still very, very far, very high for us. In fact, you've reminded us that when you change that percentage of 38%, it works for about 1.3 billion of people living in the urban areas who have access, who do not have access to safely managed sanitation. So what can we do? And especially the utilities, in line with the, with the topic that I have to share my views on. The first and foremost thing is that we all, as professionals in the sector, but it's not only professionals, even the political leaders, basically anybody who is affected by this subject, need to have to change the paradigm of looking at sanitation. We should change from looking at sanitation as an infrastructure development to a service, a public service, or a service basically as a utility service. infrastructure is there basically to help us to achieve the goal. So it's a means to an end, but not an end in itself. The second point is the point which Barbara raised, which is what is CWIS? And so CWIS, which I believe that in some sessions has already been talked about, it's basically a new approach. I think it's been on the ground over the last maybe 10 years or so, that is still new, which tries to change the way we look at sanitation, that it is a public service approach for one equitable sanitation service delivery that brings together, that brings greater promise for increasing access to safely managed sanitation. So it is aimed at ensuring 3 points that Busy talked about. One is the safety, so that of course in line with the SDG, safely managed. 2 is equitable, leaving no one behind. Everybody should be part and parcel of the receiving the service. And then thirdly, financially viable sanitation service systems. So I said, and it's built on inclusivity, the I which is in between, the inclusivity, meaning in terms of, not only in terms of geography or economic status, but also even in terms of technology. So we talk about sewerage systems, for example. We talk of on-site systems, and and all the different systems that should be there. So it should be designed to meet all the residents of the city, as I've already talked about. So CWIS is therefore built on partnership ground. Basically, as I said, leaving no one behind, making sure that everybody is involved in the planning, in the implementation, and so on. Now, how can utilities use CWIS as drivers to achieve the SDG on sanitation? One, I think, is that firstly, governments need to give clarity in terms of what I call, there are three things. One is responsibility, accountability, and issues of resources. Now, when we're talking about accountability, and this is actually based on a paper which was recently produced by Water Services for the Urban Poor, when they were talking about institutional ownership and roles and so on. When talking about accountability, government must clearly define who is accountable at the government level, at the ministry level. Is there a department that deals specifically with sanitation? Is there a budget line specifically for sanitation? Because oftentimes you have a Ministry of Water and Irrigation, Minister of Water and Health, or Minister of Water and Energy, or Minister of Water and Environment, and so on. But having just the name sanitation, in fact, is not even enough. Even a Ministry of Water and Sanitation, but there's no department for sanitation. What that means is, unfortunately, we are still continuing with that issue of saying sanitation is the orphan of water. So you keep talking about water and sanitation, but actually talking about water. So governments need to make sure that there is proper focus. And with that is the need for clarity of public policy on sanitation and urban sanitation specifically, because sometimes governments, in fact, these days have been developing sanitation policies. When you go into that, they talk a lot about rural sanitation. Usually urban sanitation is left out. So we need to have clarity on that, funding arrangements, and then institutional arrangements. And that takes me to the issue of responsibility. So government accountability, basically making sure that something happens. And responsibility basically meaning that who is actually providing the service, so that, who can you run to when you don't have the service. And this is something which is quite a challenge. And I will show you just very briefly the current situation, just to give you an example in Africa. But I know that it is the case also in many developing countries, in Southeast Asia, in Latin America, in all the developing countries. We still have a big challenge in terms of role of utilities. A lot of utilities are only dealing with the water supply. And if they have anything, they would be called water supply and sewerage authorities. But then when you look at the sewerage side, as BC mentioned, less than 25% of the global urban population is connected to a sewer network. But then in most instances, that sewer network is not even working, which means the actual percentage of safely managed is maybe 10% or even less. And I know this is the case not only in Africa, but in many others. So the utilities need to, the next stage is to adopt, particularly those that are responsible for, that have responsibility for sanitation, to go beyond the sewer approach. Sewer, in fact, as Biz already mentioned, it's very expensive in terms of infrastructure. In fact, right now, there are very, very, very few cities that have projects that are putting in any new infrastructure in terms of sewerage, or if at all, any extensions. So which means that the utilities need to adapt ways and means on working on non-sewer sanitation or on-site sanitation. Whether it's the waterborne, which is the septic tank approach, which is a solution for those cities where there's no sewer systems, but at least for the middle class, even some of the poor people can afford when they build the houses to include this. But then also the pit latrines, and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation has actually been making a lot of efforts in coming up with new, improved standards for these systems. But they must also.
Dennis,
yes.
You have another 2 minutes, please.
Yes, I'll be finishing shortly. So they must have a clear role in terms of treatment capacity, and then like fecal site treatment plant, coordinating the private sector in the emptying and transportation. That is as far as the emptying and transportation, and then of course working with municipalities to make sure that households meet what they're supposed to do. So this is what I just thought I could share in terms of what ROSE can do by adapting and adopting the CWIS approach, which I know is already being implemented, and thanks to the swaps, which is already working in this particular ground, and I would like to encourage to have more partners really involved in this. I'll just briefly show you. Oops, I wanted to show. I wanted to just briefly share some slides. I'm not even going to say much because time is gone. But this is just to show you the map of Africa with about 52 to 54 countries, depending on who is talking. These are the only utilities in Africa, but I mean, of course, in the countries, that's about 18 countries, where a utility has a defined role or responsibility for sanitation. And quite a lot of them are actually still only dealing with sewerage, the limited sewerage, but quite a number of them at least have extended. I need to mention that there are two countries, ONAS in Tunisia and ONAS in Senegal, same name, but in different countries, which are responsible only for sanitation. And then these are countries in Africa where you have a water utility, but at the moment is not involved in sanitation. Of course, there are efforts in some of them to extend, but so it's basically municipalities that are responsible for provision of sanitation. And you know what it means with municipalities. I mean, I think if we're to be honest with ourselves, if a municipality is concerned, as far as service provision, they are not the best placed institutions to provide sanitation. So that is just the slide in all. So I would like to thank you really for this opportunity, and I'm looking forward to listening to the discussions and debates. I'll be on the panel also to respond to any questions that might arise from this brief presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dennis. Thank you. Again, I like the maps because it gives us the reality. The GWOPA is about the utilities, in particular, what role can utilities play? And this session is really focused on that. And then looking at that map, if we just take Africa, we've still got a long way to go before our utilities can take this task seriously. And so the question is, how can this conversation today help inform some of those decisions for utilities to move that way? And so Dennis and BC have brought us to a point where we can begin to move into some examples. Yes, it is a gloomy picture, but it is not all gloom. People have started doing some work, and let's see what is happening across the globe. And we will have 3 presentations. The first one will be from Brazil, and it will be presented by Cesar Augusto Rizzoli. He is the technical social project manager for CAESB. I'll not try and read the Spanish name there. But Cesar has been working since 1991 as an employee of CAESB in Brazil, working on the condominium sewage program, and they have served more than 350,000 families. He's participated in consultancy training for implementation of condominium systems in Compesa, Dinepa, Haiti, and in Nicaragua and Uruguay. Now, this is important because of the WARP aspect, the training that Cesar has worked on, and we are really glad this afternoon that he can talk to us both about the work they are doing on the condominium sewers, but also how this links into training. How can we get more and more utilities to do this? Cesar, the floor is yours. And Cesar will be speaking in Spanish. So those of you who are not Spanish speakers like myself, you may want to switch to Spanish now on the language translation. Cesar, over to you.
César, tienes que darle al micrófono, por favor, para poder escucharte.
Sí, es en español, él va a hablar en español.
Un honor estar acá con ustedes y vamos a presentar sobre un aspecto de la efectividad de la implantación de sistemas de alcantarillado, ¿no? En nuestra experiencia en Brasilia. ¿Podría poner en la pantalla, Luis? Bueno, CAESB
¿Se puede ver?
Es una empresa de Distrito Federal en Brasilia con cerca de atención a cerca de 3 millones de personas. ¿Podría pasar? Entonces, ¿cuál es el contexto de alcantarillado en América Latina? ¿No? ¿Y cuál es la motivación de buscar una nueva alternativa? Aquí están gráficos esquemáticos solo para mirar la lógica de las cosas. El primer gráfico ahí hay la probabilidad de atención por alcantarillado en función del nivel de renta. Entonces, la lógica es siempre para atención de los ricos, ¿no? De quien hay plata. El segundo es un gráfico muy común en la América Latina. Por ejemplo, este es de Brasil, donde las retas de atención y de crecimiento de la población son paralelas. Nunca hay que lograr la atención plena. Además de eso, en los sistemas implantados, solo cerca de 50% tiene conexión, adhesión de la gente. Entonces, esto es una falta de efectividad de la acción de saneamiento. La próxima. ¿Y cuáles son las causas? La primera es el trazado estándar de la red, que maximiza los costos, queda caro y lleva a desatención. El segundo es que no involucra a la gente. También que se tiene como consecuencia una inercia que também leva a não conexão. E a terceira é a lógica de implantação, que não logra atenção para os pobres, né? A gente que são a maioria em nossos países. O próximo. Então, o que se buscou foi uma nova alternativa que tem dois aspectos a enfrentar, a superar. Um problema técnico e outro social. O técnico que se pensou foi uma nova forma de concepção do sistema, né? Onde a estratégia de microsistemas é fundamental. O segundo é a participação social, que é fundamental. Há que involucrar a gente, há que participar da solução. A terceira, há que ter regras justas para acesso à gente. E quarto, e o processo de implantação, que tem que ser de uma maneira que favoreça e facilite a implantação e a adesão de todos. A próxima. A componente técnica, então, vamos. O que ocorre no sistema condominial? Aqui está representado uma manzana com os seus lotes e em azul está aí a rede pública, onde se conectam as viviendas. Né? O que se faz em condominial? Se há que reemplazar las conexiones para su vecino, no para frente de la calle, pero para su vecino. Se transforma el conjunto de conexiones en un ramal condominial. Entonces, só necesito de la rede pública, el colector, solo en la punta más baja de la manzana. Entonces, se otimiza la rede, que no pasa más a toda la calle, se reduz aí a rede pública em 2/3, não quedando só 1/3. Además de isso, se traslada a rede pública a las aceras e as áreas protegidas. Então, se pode cambiar os buzones grandes, caros, por pequenas cajas de passagem. Então, se aprofundiza a redução de custos. O próximo. De outro lado, para a atenção de las viviendas, temos um esquema básico, né? Pero sempre partindo da realidade existente. Então, o projeto tem que ir a cada vivienda, sacar o ponto e cota, nível de las instalações, porque o que vamos a poner ali de conexão tem que fazer a atenção. Este é o compromisso que o sistema convencional não há. Então, o ponto fundamental é isso. Então, temos por la frente, em las aceras, que são as maioria, pero pode ser adentro, o fundo de lote, a frente, ou uma configuração onde seja possível. A próxima. Então, a cidade de los libros não está em nossos países, né? Não está tudo muito bonito, favorável. Temos que superar todos os problemas de ocupação e os problemas de urbanismo regular. A próxima. Então, essas são as cidades que temos que enfrentar as situações, né? Onde não há espaço para passar a rede, onde a calle está arriba de las viviendas, em los morros, em todas essas situações. Próxima. Então, poderia passar a próxima? Então, qual é o problema principal? É a qualidade dos projetos e da concepção, né? Em la prática do convencional, do corrente, que se hace normalmente é utilizar na norma técnica, né, la pendiente, la atención tativa y la legislación, ¿no? Solo para proyecto. Entonces, el sistema de recolección, si no hay atención a la vivienda, el problema es de la gente, ¿no? Entonces, no mira lo que existe. ¿Por qué? La legislación se garantiza para el proyectista que él está siempre cierto, mismo sin mirar la realidad. En el caso de condominial, además de la norma, la legislación, miramos que existe, es la condición de todo el sistema, es la instalación existente. Entonces, aquí hay una obligación de atención a todos. Esta es una forma muy distinta de proyectar. Hay más trabajo, pero esta es la función del sistema, ¿no? Entonces, toda vivienda se garantiza ahí. Y hay un contacto muy fuerte, por eso, con los usuarios. ¿Podría pasar? ¿Cuál es la reducción de costos que hay? En un sistema convencional, tenemos ahí cerca de 70 a 75% es de los colectores, los custos. Y los 25, 30 de las conexiones. Cuando se transforma en condominial, las conexiones se transforman en ramales condominiales, con costo tal vez 15% arriba de las conexiones. Pero tiene un ahorro muy grande de los colectores, ¿eh? Entonces, y que se varía de 30 a 60%, dependiendo de los anchos de los lotes. Cuanto menores son los lotes, mayor el ahorro. Cuanto mayor el ancho de las calles, mayor el ahorro. Y mayor nivel de pavimentación de las calles, mayor el ahorro, porque salimos de las calles, ¿no? El próximo. Y la componente social, podría pasar. Es una participación comunitaria, pero objetiva, que no es un tratado sociológico, pero una relación que se establece de práctica de participación, de ciudadanía. Y tiene que partir siempre del conocimiento de la realidad, no solo de la localidad, de la gente, ¿no? Y lo que se hace, en síntesis, es la discusión de la intervención
on the
con la gente.
intervention.
La próxima.
First.
Cesar, you have 2 minutes to go, please.
Ok. En general. Ok. Hace reuniones generales, después reuniones en las cuadras. Se hace después el proyecto junto con la gente en el lote. Y se produce el producto principal, que es el proyecto acordado con la gente. La próxima. Las reglas de acceso. Tiene que hacer una calibración de los costos de responsabilidad de la gente con su capacidad de pago. Y establecer formas de esta participación, de alternativas de participación. ¿Podría pasar al próximo? El próximo. Y lo que llamamos el proceso, ¿eh? Que es trabajar antes de la obra, pero cerquita de su inicio, haciendo todos los acuerdos y el proyecto ejecutivo de los ramales. Y se estabelecendo la adhesión antes de la obra. Y la obra se produce de una vez solo, tanto el colector, el sistema colector, la planta, pero también la conexión en una obra solo, porque ya tiene la adhesión anterior. Entonces, al final de la obra, solo comunica a la gente y empezamos a trabajar. El próximo. Entonces, ¿cómo se actúa la parte social con la parte técnica? Na parte técnica, a nova concepción reduce custo, hay atención de más gente. De otro lado, la participación comunitaria se produce, forja ahí la adhesión plena.
is produced
Entonces,
thanks
isso,
to,
esses
and
dois,
therefore the
hay
full
una sinergia aí
adherence
que,
of
al final,
all people.
atendemos mais gente e com adesão
therefore,
plena. Nossa adesão acá em Brasília é cerca de 100%. Então, temos uma efetividade da ação de saneamento, que é problema muito grave na América Latina. Bueno, foi muito rápido, pero estamos aí à disposição para qualquer questão.
Thank you so much, Cesar. And I know you have a lot to share, but we will get. Hello? 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 Hello?
Dear Barbara, you have another tab with the translation open. Can you close it?
All right, now it's figured out. Thank you so much. So Cesar, thank you so much. We'll open it up for 2 questions only, and then we move to the next presentation. 2 questions for Cesar, please. Okay, do I have any question in the chat, Francisca, for Cesar?
No questions so far.
All right.
But we will also have a follow-up meeting room for group discussions.
All right. Thank you very much, Cesar, for that. And we move on to the next presentation. I think Cesar raises a number of issues there around the physical challenges that must be addressed, the social aspects, the issue of affordability, and also agreeing with the users as critical players. And I think this is key to the whole citywide inclusive sanitation agenda. So thank you for sharing that. So let's move on now and build off of that. And I'm going to bring in now our colleagues from Senegal. We have Muhammad Dugai and Yauba Baude, who will be speaking to us about their experience in Senegal. And having them here, they're both coming from... Yes.
I still have an echo.
I'm not sure why.
Oui, donc j'ai déjà partagé ma présentation avec Éveil. Il peut projeter, Voilà, donc bonjour tout le monde. Je vais vous faire une présentation.
Monsieur Mamadou, s'il vous plaît, avant de commencer, essayez de fermer en fait le player de traduction. Et après, activez votre micro et vous pouvez commencer. Monsieur Mohamedou, on ne vous écoute pas.
Oui, c'est bon, TV.
Non, monsieur Mohamedou, il y a toujours un écho de votre côté. Donc, si vous pouvez arrêter le player de traduction et activer.
Ok, donc je vais démarrer. Voilà, donc c'est le cas du Sénégal.
This is the case corresponding to Senegal.
Dans la facilitation de l'adoption. Voilà. Voilà, c'est bon?
Oui.
Donc, je vais vous présenter la situation du Sénégal sur l'assainissement autonome, surtout sur les facilitations de l'adoption de nouvelles technologies d'assainissement. Vous savez que le Sénégal a été choisi par la Fondation Gates comme une plateforme de test de solutions d'assainissement innovants. Et dans ce cadre, nous avons pu accueillir des technologies d'assainissement innovants telles que les toilettes, l'omniprocesseur et l'omni-ingesteur ou omnidigesteur. Et donc, nous avons expérimenté ces technologies et je vais vous faire la présentation d'un programme qui s'appelle Programme de structuration du marché des boues de vidange, qui a été financé par la Fondation Bill et Melinda Gates de 2011 jusqu'à maintenant. Donc, de 2011 à 2020, on était dans la phase pilote du programme. Maintenant, on est dans la phase de mise à l'échelle à partir de 2020. Next slide, prochaine. Voilà, donc la présentation se fera autour de 3 points. Donc, ce programme, avec ses objectifs, ses défis, activités et composantes. Ensuite, les perspectives en technologie d'assainissement innovant. Et puis, une étude de cas sur une société privée qui a fait ses preuves dans l'assainissement autonome au Sénégal, qui est délégataire des stations de traitement des boues de vidange. Actuellement, cette société gère 10 stations de délégation dans les boues de vidange. Il s'appelle Delvic Sanitation Initiative. Prochain slide. Next slide. Eve. Voilà, ça c'est un peu pour vous présenter l'objectif du PSMBV. Ce programme avait pour objectif de promouvoir la chaîne de valeur de l'assainissement autonome à travers une gestion efficiente par des technologies innovantes avec le secteur privé pour un service de qualité et accessible. Vous voyez que l'aspect innovation est bien pris en compte dans les objectifs de ce programme. Donc, il fallait faire avoir une collaboration très proche entre le secteur public et le secteur privé. Parmi les composantes, nous avions la recherche, le marketing, l'infrastructure, l'énergie et les toilettes dans les zones inondées. Voilà. Vous voyez les photos avant qu'on mette en place ce programme. À gauche, on avait un site de dépotoir qui était presque un site de dépotoir qui était laissé à lui-même. Parce qu'il n'y avait pas de station de traitement à bout de vidange. Donc, c'est la situation avant projet, à gauche. Et à droite, vous avez la situation après projet avec les stations de traitement de bout de vidange. Next slide. Prochain slide. Alors, les défis du programme de structuration du marché des bouts de vidange au Sénégal, PSMBV, c'était d'abord d'organiser le secteur de la vidange et faire des vidangeurs des acteurs de développement, déléguer aussi les stations de traitement de bouts de vidange, mettre en place des normes pour la vidange et les toilettes, la vidange mécanique bien sûr, trouver des technologies d'assainissement innovantes permettant aux zones inondables de disposer de toilettes utilisables en toute saison, saison des pluies et saison sèche. Il fallait aussi baisser le coût de la vidange de façon substantielle pour un peu créer l'équilibre entre les subventions faites au niveau de l'assainissement collectif pour le branchement au réseau et un service à rendre aux usagers qui utilisent l'assainissement autonome et qui payent en même temps la redevance d'assainissement dans leur facture d'eau et qui ne bénéficient pas du réseau d'égout. Ensuite, transformer le secteur de l'assainissement en un secteur marchand. Et il fallait donner de la valeur au bout de vidange et ensuite opérationnaliser l'omniprocesseur, qui est une machine qui permet de transformer les bouts en énergie, en eau distillée, qui peut être utilisée dans les refroidissements des véhicules, des moteurs de véhicules, et en cendre, qui peut être utilisée pour la fabrication de pavés et aussi pour la fabrication d'un fertilisant organominéral. Next slide. Alors, vous voyez la chaîne de valeur de l'assainissement autonome avec les activités du PSMBV, depuis la collecte en passant par le stockage, le transport avec les camions de vidange, le traitement et la réutilisation. Sur le maillon collecte, on a fait des recherches pour des toilettes adaptées aux zones inondées et inondables. Pour le maillon stockage, nous avons fait la réglementation. Il y a un décret qui est sur la table du gouvernement du Sénégal pour réglementer l'activité de vidange. On a mis en place un centre d'appel pour rapprocher les besoins des populations et les offres des vidangeurs. Donc la demande et l'offre, pour faire compétir les vidangeurs et faire baisser substantiellement le coût de la vidange. On a accordé des crédits pour les vidangeurs pour acheter 29 camions. Et au niveau du maillon de traitement, nous avons pu construire une station de traitement de bout de vidange au niveau d'une banlieue lointaine de la région de Dakar. Au niveau de la réutilisation, les bouts ont été transformés en compost, en pavé, etc. Et aussi en énergie et en eau avec l'omniprocesseur. Next slide. Le centre d'appel a été mis en place et le bilan a été satisfaisant parce que ça a permis de baisser substantiellement le coût de la vidange. Next slide. La composante marketing, donc c'est toujours le centre d'appel qui rapproche les ménages et les vidangeurs avec la vidange mécanique. Allez-y, next slide. Alors, la composante infrastructure, nous avons délégué 9 stations de traitement vidange à Delvic, qui est la société privée qui a gagné l'appel d'offres pour l'opérationnalisation et la maintenance, l'exploitation et la maintenance de ces stations. Next slide. Pour les toilettes dans les zones inondées et inondables, nous avons expérimenté 3 types de toilettes: le biofilcom, le biofilter et le Hertz-Auger. Et chaque toilette a pu donner satisfaction avec des systèmes qui permettent de traiter les bouts sur place et de récupérer l'effluent dans des quartiers réputés être des zones inondables dans la banlieue de Dakar. On a essayé de mettre en place un plan d'affaires en fournissant un paquet socio-économique de base aux populations basé sur des toilettes, une offre basée sur des toilettes, l'assurance santé et le bonus crédit téléphonique. Nous avons expérimenté ça. Allez-y. Next slide. Alors, pour la composante recherche énergie, Nous avons expérimenté depuis 2015 sur financement avec un don de la Fondation Gay, l'omniprocesseur version 1 qui permet d'incinérer 12,3 mètres cubes de boue de vidange par jour, de produire de l'électricité pour une puissance instantanée de 150 kW, de produire de l'eau distillée pour une quantité de 11 mètres cubes par jour, de produire de la cendre pour une quantité de 1 tonne par jour. Les résultats obtenus, donc c'est la production d'énergie à 40%, la production d'eau distillée comme coolant pour refroidir les moteurs de véhicules avec un certificat de l'université Cheikh Anta Diop de Dakar. La production de cendre utilisable à hauteur de 40% pour substituer le ciment dans la fabrication de pavés, ce qui a été certifié par l'université Cheikh Anta Diop de Dakar. La production de cendre utilisable à hauteur de 15% pour la fabrication d'un engrais organominéral certifié par l'Institut sénégalais de recherche agricole. Next slide. Next slide. Just 1 minute or 2 minutes is possible. OK, donc l'évaluation du programme a donné des résultats globaux satisfaisants. Donc vous voyez un peu le diagramme en toile d'araignée pour chaque composante. Allez-y, next slide. Next slide. L'omniprocesseur V2, vous voyez qu'il est en expérimentation au niveau de la STBV à Dakar, à Tivaouane-Peulh, et peut produire 3 fois plus de boue, peut incinérer 3 fois plus de boue, produire 2 fois plus d'électricité que l'omniprocesseur V1, produire 2 fois plus d'eau distillée et 2 fois plus de cendre que la V1, que l'omniprocesseur V1. Nous avons l'omnidigesteur qui permet de transformer le boue en 25% de boue de vidange et 75% d'eau obtenue par membrane d'ultrafiltration. On élimine les germes pathogènes totalement avec cette technologie. On réduit aussi le nombre de lits de séchage, ce qui permet d'avoir un traitement intensif dans des villes où il y a des problèmes de disponibilité d'espace pour installer des lits de séchage et des STBV qui demandent beaucoup d'espace. Next slide, maybe the last one. Alors, pour Delvic, vous avez vu un peu la chronologie qui a été créée en 2013 et jusqu'en 2017, nous avons vu son évolution. Next slide. Next slide, please. Alors, Delvic, vous voyez un peu ce que Delvic fait sur la chaîne de valeur de l'assainissement, surtout sur la partie traitement. Vous voyez que à partir des boues de vidange, on a du compost 5%, de l'eau 90% et des boues à 5%, qui sont les 5% de boue sont mis dans l'omniprocesseur. Ça permet d'avoir 40% d'eau et 60% de matière solide qui peuvent être utilisées pour parlonnance au niveau des stations d'épuration pour traitement de l'eau. Ou bien les boues séchées peuvent être vendues aux agriculteurs et Delvic fait un partage de bénéfices 50%, 50% avec l'ONAS, avec ce contrat de délégation de secteur de service public. Je vous remercie de votre attention. Merci beaucoup. Ça, c'est le dernier slide.
Thank you very much, Mohamedou, for that. And I think a few things that you've highlighted there on the role the government has played through ONAS in creating an enabling environment for both the private sector and also for the consumers, making it easier for the consumers to access the services. And I think that is critical when we talk about citywide inclusive sanitation. We will take 1 or 2 questions for Mohamedou and then we move to the next presentation. Do we have anybody who has a question for Mohamedou at this point? Okay, I'm not seeing any questions. Let's move on and hopefully we will have a discussion during the plenary session. So we've been to Latin America, We came back into Africa, and now we are going to Asia. So we have a representation of the 3 southern continents. And I'm happy to introduce to you Mr. Asim Mansouri. He's the senior program lead at the Center for Water and Sanitation, CEPT University in India. He is actively engaged in supporting implementation of city sanitation plans in small and medium towns of Maharashtra, with a focus on fecal sludge and septage management. And he is the lead person for implementing citywide inclusive sanitation program of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation in Y City of Maharashtra. Asim, you are very welcome to make your presentation, please.
Thanks, Barbara, for the introduction. I'll just share my screen. Is my slide visible?
Yes, it is, but you might have to speak up a little bit louder, please.
Sure. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to one and all from the different parts of the world. Today, we are going to talk about this concept of citywide inclusive sanitation, how these 2 cities, Y and Sinnar, and to some of the questions that Gessi and Dennis raised, that how cities can actually implement citywide inclusive sanitation, will be answered in this presentation. So we are going to talk about this city of Y and Sinnar. And this presentation I'm making on behalf of the cities. Unfortunately, they could not join, but I'm making this on behalf of them and the team that has worked, the Center for Water and Sanitation team that has worked on this project and make this happen along with the city. So just for the larger audience to get a brief context about the cities, this city of Y, it's located on the western side of India. And it's a small town with 43,000 population. It's a very compact town, as you can see in the map here. It's around 4 square kilometers. This town is famous for various Indian movies that have been shot here. If you like Bollywood movies, many of them have been shot here. As well as this is a very holy town. It's a religious town, and it's called the Dakshin Kashi of India. The other city, which is Sinnar, it's a fast-growing town, again on the western side of India, but it's a fast-growing industrial town, and it has a population of around 73,000. Now, the point to highlight here is that this population may sound a little smaller to all of you, that it's in the range of 50,000 to 1 lakh population, but these cities are representative of 4,000 plus small and medium cities in India. So that's a huge number. So whatever we are able to do in these 2 cities can be replicated in India in these 4,000 cities, as well as in small and medium towns of Southeast Asia. To begin with, I think when we began our work in Maharashtra in 2014, these cities, we were used to call them as the urban laboratories, where we tried, tested, failed, passed as well. And these are some of the key highlights, that these cities implemented scheduled desludging for the first time in India, involved private sector, levied sustainable mechanisms to finance these operations, had a treatment plant, demonstrated reuse, and last but not the least, the very important point, what even I think Dennis was mentioning about the municipal commitment, the political commitment of the city to implement these programs. So these cities moved from urban laboratories to lighthouse cities. To begin with, in 2013, when this concept was very new, fecal sludge septage management, I think we all were learning during that time what this concept was. These cities introduced, had given out an executive order. It's an order at a city level, which said that the city will implement citywide inclusive fecal sludge management plan, involve a private sector, do scheduled desludging that had never happened in the country before, allocate land and levy tax to finance this mechanism. And it was one of the first cities in India to pass such a resolution in 2013, when this concept was very new. So what is this idea of scheduled desludging? I think we all in the sanitation sector know that most of our services are on demand based. And to provide an inclusive service, we need to move from demand to schedule, wherein in the demand based, when your septic tank or on-site system gets full, you raise a complaint and your services are answered by the local government or private sector against a charge. From this, the city decided that let's move towards scheduled practices, wherein the septic tanks would be desludged at a predetermined schedule, that like your SWM door-to-door collection, that how your waste is being collected daily from your household, this septic tanks will be desludged at a regular interval of 3 years. There will be additional trucks that will be procured and private sector could be engaged for providing the service. And this would be financed through sanitation tax and not from the charges, but from the tax that the people pay as a part of the property tax. So the idea of this whole inclusive sanitation service delivery that these local governments have implemented has been broadly divided into three phases, that how the planning was done. So first, this is like, for example, the city of Y. It was divided into three zones, zone 1, 2, and 3, and each zone is desludged every year. So a cycle of 3 years is repeated after the 3 years are complete and all the zones are completed. Based on the information of toilet and septic tanks that the city had, they determined the number of trucks and a route planning was done. Very important. Like for example, this is a simple example of this zone 1 that you see here. This way the route planning was done for the whole city, and the private sector who was involved for doing this activity followed this route in consultation with the city government. So both the cities Y and Sinnar had resolved, as I mentioned before, to involve private sector, but at that time they had raised two concerns. One was that the local government, the concern that they had raised was that they do not want to pay to a private sector if they are not performing. So to resolve that challenge, the city floated a performance-based annuity, performance-linked contract, wherein based on the performance of the private sector, the payment is made. So for example, under this contract for Y, they had to desludge 6,000 septic tanks over the period of 3 years. So annually around 2,000. So if the private sector only desludged like 70% of the tanks, they were only paid for the 70% of the contract value and not the 100%. That was from the local government side. But there were also challenges that the private sector had raised. For example, and that's maybe true across the world, that they are delayed in payments. So how do you redress that problem from the private sector? So this local government did for first time in India a escrow agreement, which was part of the contract, wherein they did an escrow agreement between the local government, the private sector, and the local bank, which is a tripartite agreement where the local government agreed to retain 3 months of balance payment in that account to pay to the private sector once the bills are raised. So, for example, if the private sector was to pay $20,000 a month, this account will always have $60,000 in its account to pay to the private sector. So, in that way, the delayed payment risk was resolved for the private sector. The model that we followed was through the local government bidding process, a transparent bidding process, and the private sector was selected through this. One of the, on the inclusivity aspects, we need to highlight this point, that all the septic tanks in the cities, whether they are in a slum or a non-slum area, were to be desludged by this private sector, and they cannot charge anything against that, but the local government will pay. And we'll talk about the financing model in the later slides. So this is the financing model, wherein the desludging service provider enters into an agreement with local government. The private sector brings in the capital cost and the O&M cost for providing this service. They provide this service to all the properties in a city. Against that, the citizens pay a sanitation tax or a property tax, which is part of their annual property tax system, to the local government. And local government, based on the performance of this private sector through the escrow account, makes the payment. So in that way, we were able to close this loop of financial cycle, and we called it the performance linked annuity model because the payment was being done on the performance basis. To make it more inclusive, the whole concept of citywide inclusive, how do you make financing inclusive? So the city said that let's do differential charges. So for example, if a property does not have a toilet, they are charged differently, and similarly for a non-residential property as well. To make it now more equitable, this was more like a flat tax that the city levied. And one point to highlight here, that before the scheduled desludging started, the households were paying almost $30 to $40 for emptying their septic tanks. Against that, they are now only paying like $4 or $1.5 per annum to get their septic tanks desludged. So that's the difference, and this is the way we were able to make it more financially sustainable as well as an acceptable service for the local for the households. And the city provided this as a public service to its citizens. And to make it more inclusive, now the city is now even planning to levy sanitation tax as a percentage of property tax. So smaller properties will pay lesser tax as compared to larger properties. So in that way, they are trying to make it more inclusive and equitable. So based on all this experience of scheduled desludging, what we have been able to attain through this private sector local government model, that almost 20, this is the city of Y and this is the map. The green areas are the septic tanks that have been desludged. Almost 2,400 septic tanks have been serviced in Y till now, covering 5,000 properties, and 90% of septic tanks are covered. This number, I think 3 years ago, it was only 100 septic tanks annually. Against that, this city, through scheduled desludging and providing as a public service to its citizens, has been able to desludge 2,400 septic tanks. And this is despite COVID that was going on. And they said that as this is a service, this should still continue during COVID times as well. Apart from the inclusivity aspect, I think it's important to highlight that due to scheduled desludging, there were also improvements in the ground and river water quality. As the septic tanks were being desludged more regularly, the effluent that was coming out of the septic tanks had a better quality. It was still not the best, but it was better than before, as solids were not coming out. And due to this, the effluent that was flowing in drains and that ultimately went inside the river, it all improved the quality of the river and groundwater. And there were FSTPs set up through the local government funds. And these FSTPs were solar powered, and all the treated wastewater from these FSTPs, as you can see in the photographs, they were reused at the site for doing landscaping and urban forest. And it was created as a resource center so that people can come and visit and learn about the activities that the city has done. Awareness generation was one of the key reasons due to which there was success, and people were able to highlight that and even understand that why there is a need to do scheduled desludging services. IT-based monitoring systems like Sanitab and Sanitrack, which is like an Amazon app that we all have, that once a service is provided, a signature-based app is used to monitor the end-to-end FSM services, and this is being monitored through dashboards, and it also monitors whether the slum households have been covered through this mechanisms and through these scheduled services and all. Very important, I think, when we talk about inclusivity, it's about what Dennis meant, taking everyone together. And we saw a very potential role of engaging with women for providing this FSM service delivery. Along with the local government in Maharashtra, in the state where we work, there is 50% representation of women in the elected bodies. So we did capacity building workshops with them so that we can build their capacity on FSM. We celebrated women champions, sensitizing women at households, because when the desludging service was being provided, there were women who were at home, and we build their capacities along with the city to make them understand the need of desludging services. And this resource, FSTP Resource Center in Sinnar, as you can see here, where the treated wastewater is used, is managed by the self-help women group in these cities. And through, so this is the way we engage with women.
Asim,
yes.
You need to wrap up, please.
Yeah, last slide, last two slides. Yeah. So just to conclude, what we have been able to, what the city has been able to attain as a public service, 5,300 septic tanks have been desludged in those towns. 28 million liters of septage has been treated with 90-95% acceptance rate for scheduled services. Women are being empowered, and households are now paying a sanitation tax as a part of property tax to get this service once in 3 years. And both the cities have sustained the status of ODF++, which is one of the certifications as per Government of India. It's important that we don't do pilots and scale this up, as that has been our experience. Though we have been scaling up these learnings at Maharashtra level, where we are working through policies and guidelines, as well as national levels, and tools have been prepared so that it can be widely used by other cities in India as well as in other countries. Last but not the least, it's important to acknowledge that this has only happened due to partnerships and collaboration, and we are thankful to our funders, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and HSBC, as well as our city and state partners, the local government and the state government, and the NFSSM Alliance, which is an alliance of 30 sector partners who work at national level to scale up fecal sludge septic management in India. So we'd like to thank all of them. Thanks. And if anyone has any queries or wants to visit our website, most of these materials are available on this website, or you can write to us.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Asim. And again, I do apologize for moving you quickly, but we do want to bring in the other two presentations. So please hold your questions for Asim. We will have a discussion in the plenary. We are going to move from the utility level, telling us about the sanitation value chain and how it is perceived by people who are working in that space, and move to the WOP. How can we build the capacity to meet the sanitation challenge through peer-to-peer learning? And we have two guests. We will start with Mohammed Homeidan. He is the process engineer for Nablus municipality in Palestine, and he is with Lucatina Ecolano from Hamburg in Germany. Engineer Homeidan is one of the key personnel of Nablus wastewater treatment plant. He is well-qualified operator, trained in Germany, and he has participated in commissioning of different WWTPs, which is wastewater treatment plants in West Bank and Gaza. And Lucatina combines organizational thinking and communication skills with an in-depth understanding of water and wastewater related operation and management processes. So she brings in the soft side, because I think you've heard from everybody, you can do the hardware, but without the software, you're really not getting anywhere. So Engineer Homeidan and Lucatino, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you very much, Barbara. Can you hear me?
Very well.
Okay, so I start with our presentation. I'm very happy to be here together with Mohammed. We have a long partnership, a long swap. You see here the hills of the beautiful city of Nablus in Palestine in the West Bank. We will give you a very short introduction to our swap. It's a long-lasting swap. Here on the picture, you see the inner city of Nablus and our agenda. I start with a presentation of one partner of the swap. One partner is Hamburg Water. So we are in northern Germany. We have over 2 million of served people. We only have one very, very big wastewater treatment plant. You can see it here on the picture right below. You see this funny X. So we do fermentation of our wastewater sludge. And that is what Mohammed and his colleagues in Nablus are also doing. So we are generating energy from the sludge, and we are fully energy autark. So we don't need any energy from outside. The wastewater treatment plant produces the energy it needs. Hamburg Water also has a small project of decentral wastewater treatment. It's a separation of the wastewater streams. We have vacuum toilets, and we have a decentral treatment of the wastewater. And we also make biogas from it in a combined heat and power plant. We use the energy to produce heating. And with this, I already hand over to Mohammed.
Thank you, Lucatina. Thank you, Barbara, for the introduction. I'm really happy to be here in this session. And from Hamburg Wasser, from the big plant in Hamburg to the small plant in Nablus, which is really doing very well in the treatment performance. Now we are talking about Nablus wastewater treatment plant, and in the future we will have Nablus East, and those are depending on the catchment of Nablus city. Nablus West has a design capacity of 14,000.5, around 0.5 cubic meter per day, and it's commissioned in 2013. The process is activated sludge extended aeration with primary sedimentation tank and an aerobic digester. And it has, on the process operation, in the years of operation, it has improved to have a CHP plant. And what I want to say here, that it was one of the challenges, really, in Nablus and in Palestine, that we have the first anaerobic digester. And I was remembering all the time that many negotiation in that time in the design phase about, can we as operator in Nablus city and operator in Palestine, can we handle the operation of an aerobic digester? And in that time, it was an issue. But now we have the first anaerobic digester in Palestine, in West Bank and Gaza, and we have well operated. And in this slide, we can see some pictures from the treatment plant, and it depicted the effluent water in the right hand and the BV panels, and some and also the anaerobic digester, which I talked about in the middle picture. Yes. Now with Luca. Luca?
Lucatina, are you there?
Thank you very much, Mohammed. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. Sorry. Yes, so I start with some facts of our cooperation. We already started to work together during 2013. So when this beautiful plant in Nablus West was commissioned, some experienced people from Hamburg came to live in Nablus for a longer time. They were permanently on site and they assisted Mohammed and his colleagues to make a very good commissioning and to take over the plant from the manufacturer that built it. Also, there were short-term missions of some particular other people from Hamburg. For example, we have experienced electricians that know about the SCADA system, and they came maybe for 2 weeks or 3 weeks to help in a certain area. What was really, really nice is that the colleagues from Nablus came to Hamburg for several weeks to stay with us. It's always been a pleasure to have you here, and the people from Nablus could experience how it's done in Hamburg, and we also came to Nablus to see how it's done in Nablus. Then after 2015, very quickly, actually the plant operators in Nablus, mainly Youssef and Mohammed, were able to operate the plant independently. So it was possible that there was no one permanently on site. It was in the responsibility of the Nablus municipality team, and only if it's necessary, people came from Hamburg to assist maybe. And still we have good cooperation that sometimes we try to organize some maybe training. Lately, there was a guy coming for the CHP that generates electricity and heat from the biogas that it is produced. And some younger colleagues from Nablus still are coming to Hamburg to have some training with us. Mohammed, do you want to add something, or it's okay to go to the second slide?
Yes, maybe in brief, yeah, for the operation assistant for the 2 years. Yeah, it was really a good chance for us in Nablus West as an operator to see the treatment plant operated fully responsibility by the team of Consul Aqua and Hamburg Wasser. And in the end of the operation assistant, by 6 months, they just only monitor us and check what we are doing in troubles. And that's really was one of the effective points of training to check and assess our performance. Thank you, Luca, for that aspect. And now for outcomes for our partnerships, I think maybe we are putting many outcomes here in this slides, but maybe the main and major outcome that these partnerships make our treatment plant as an idol for all the treatment plants in West Bank and Gaza, because it has only the things in the first. We have the first digester in the treatment in Palestine. We have the first CHP unit in Palestine. We have applying the reuse standard for using the treated water in agriculture, and this is really taking us on the priority of Palestinian Water Authority, and also the priority for all the wastewater treatment plants in the area. All these results and outcomes, it is coming after many and huge efforts collaborated between all these parties, Hamburg Wasser, Consul Aqua, and Nablus Municipality. Next slide. Here we can highlight the main and important quotes from KfW. We have a quote: in the West Bank, only a few crops thrive that have adapted to the extreme dry conditions in summer. But for the farmers west of the city of Nablus, a new source of water has now been found that will reduce their dependency on rain. And this is an indication for our reuse projects that we have done. And another quote: the West Nablus wastewater treatment plant serves as a model for other plants, and this is what I'm talking about as an outcome. For the reuse in Palestine, using treated wastewater in agriculture is a new idea. It is existed in a standard, but it's not applicable only by us, and now other treatment plants on the way. Next slide. Here we have some pictures of memories between us and Hamburg Wasser and Consul Aqua. And really, I would like to appoint the left picture for our expert, Karsten Schuya. Now Luca is pointing on him. He's passed away from 3 years, and really we are standing for him, and we are standing as a respect for this guy who's really helped us many times, and he was our father on training and our father on operation. So I have to say that, because this is a true sentence that I have to say on this man. And in another pictures, we can see our chief operator with many job shadowing travels in Germany. Yes, now look at the next slide.
Thank you, grazie, Mohammed. I agree. So the heart of this cooperation was Karsten Schuya, who passed away, and for me, he serves as a model for many things. And yeah, swaps or cooperation is always about people, and he really was also for me like a father, showing me how to do things. Here we can see many other aspects. So often people from Nablus come to us to visit. We could organize with a delegation on effluent standards from Palestine. We went to Italy because they are reusing the treated wastewater sludge in agriculture. And as you have already heard, the Nablus West wastewater treatment plant effluent is already used, but now we are also thinking to use the sludge as a fertilizer. And in this region, Milan of Italy, they are using the sludge as a fertilizer, mainly also for rice. They grow rice on it, and so we went there. Here you can see different things we already did together. And maybe we come to our closing words. I will start, and then Mohammed has the last word. So in my experience, what we need for swaps is trust and time. So we are cooperating since a very long time, and this is a good basis to exchange. And if there are problems, we can call, we can use WhatsApp, and we always try to find solution and to find fundings. Actually, this is our main problem. Because KfW sometimes puts money to Palestine, but at the moment not so much. So we are trying to find also new sources. And I am personally so thankful for the cooperation, and I learned a lot and grew with this swap. And I'm looking forward to see what is going on in Palestine. I know you are now going for the next wastewater treatment plant in Nablus, and it's always a pleasure to hear from you. Thank you, and Mohammed.
Thank you, Luca. And really, one of the important things that I learned from the training in Hamburg and from the training in our site, that the operation of the treatment, it's an endless optimization process. So what we have as a higher technical performance, it can be optimized in the end, and we can go for more and further developments. So this is what Luca said, that we can search for a fund, we can go for more development for the treatment plant as more clean for a biogas to increase the performance of CHP and other things. So 16 years of cooperation between the parties are truly evidence of the trust on the partnership, which is clearly also depicted by the excellent results on the ground. And this is what we can see in our pioneered wastewater treatment in Palestine. Thank you very much.
Thank you both very much for that. I think you've raised issues about reusing waste, no longer seeing waste as waste, but as a resource that can be used in many, many different ways. You've talked about the timing, that the technical assistance or the exchange on this peer-to-peer, you've got to think about the time. It takes a long time, but you also need some short-term engagement, and it is a lot of work, and also you've got to think about the funding, but in the end, it is worthwhile. That's a very big message that you've given us. So thank you so much for sharing that. We're going to move to the last presentation in this set, and we will advise on how we move forward given the time. But for now, allow me to introduce Mwansa Nachula. I call her my little sister. She is the sanitation specialist at Lusaka Water and Sanitation Company. She's an environmental engineer with over 10 years experience in developing and implementing water projects. But we brought her on because she's currently leading the work on the citywide inclusive sanitation program that Lusaka Water is undertaking, and has also been leading the WARP between Lusaka Water and Durban. So Mwansa, over to you, please.
Thank you very much, Barbara. Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. So let me quickly share my presentation. Okay.
Lucatina, can you stop your sharing? Okay, thanks.
Are you able to see my screen now?
Yes, Mwansa, please, yes, please proceed.
Okay, great.
And sorry, before Mwansa starts, I've been at the bottom, for our participants, at the bottom of your screen, you will see a Mentimeter link. Please go there, type in your answers. We will look at them as we wrap up the session. At the bottom of your live screening, please go down, Mentimeter, click on it, answer the questions, and we will wrap up. We'll present the answers as we wrap up. Thank you. Mwansa, back to you.
Okay, thank you so much, Barbara. So I will quickly run through just a brief background, just so we get an understanding on, first of all, why Lusaka Water had to engage in certain partnerships, and really the challenge that we had on our hands to ensure that we provide adequate products and services. So this is just the background of Lusaka, and if you can see, I've put up a map that shows, for Lusaka, that shows the different types of sanitation facilities that we have. And then on your top, is it right or left? I think you'll see a graph just briefly shows what kind of sanitation facilities that people use. And then also we just try to relate the sanitation facility versus just the quantals that we have. So basically, this gives a background of Lusaka in terms of sanitation, and this is a map of our underground water. And just I want to take you back. So if you see the map and where we've put, where we're actually saying we have pit latrines being utilized, and then looking at this map where the red or the orange that indicates the vulnerable areas, you see that there's a relationship, and most of our facilities that are not safe are actually constructed within this region where we have a high risk of underground water. And so these are some of the issues that actually led Lusaka Water to actually partner with a RASO program with Durban, Itiquini being our mentor, but then we had also opportunity to visit other places like Kampala as well as Senegal. And some of the ideas that we implemented that I'll run you through were as a result of this partnership and also the lessons learned. Most importantly, also the fact that Lusaka Water, through our regulator, we had a mandate expansion. So initially, and I think Dr. Mwanza related to this, our mandate has changed from storage to sanitation, meaning we needed to provide services to our low-income areas, sanitation services most importantly. And so we had to come up based on the lessons that we learned, that I think as a utility, we needed a strategy, like a policy guidance on how we're going to really develop and operationalize on-site sanitation based on the lessons that we learned. So some of the challenges, like I've mentioned, is also the fact that for Lusaka, it was a very different line of business because our mandate initially was to provide sanitation services on the storage aspect, and then also just developing and strengthening a dedicated department. We had a low-income department, but it was more focused on providing water and sanitation storage services. Although we had an aspect of us providing services to low-income areas, we really, because of the mandate, the utilities focus was not fully on this, but then because of a change in regulation, and then also the various partnerships that we saw and the results that were coming from this partnership, we had to ensure that this is actualized in the utility, as well as the North schools are regulated because our services are regulated. It was also a new line for them to regulate on-site sanitation. Also, the fact that it's really, it was a non-context. Also, we don't know the revenue potential because we are a commercial utility. And then also, like I mentioned, and if you relate to the map I showed earlier, every time we're quite nervous when it's a rainy season between October and April, because we experience a lot of cholera outbreaks and also other waterborne diseases. So based on the lessons and also the partnerships that we created, especially some lessons drawn from Ghana as well under the project for construction of household toilets, we came up with this program to construct household toilets because we thought it was very key to ensure that before the utility, before we provide this service and also looking at the public good aspects, we had to have proper toilets where we can empty this facility. This then reduces our contamination of groundwater that we have, which is a key thing for us as we are a water utility company. So the provision of this is we had to design these human-centered designs, a lesson that we also drew from Ghana, that people really needed, you need to construct facilities for facilities that people want and not what we want as a technocrats or maybe as a utility. And then the way we had to have this successful was through what we are calling a discount of about 2,400, which is almost like $150, and then which households paid for their substructure. But then for the utility, because our interest was really protecting underground water, we pay for the cost of the substructure. But this result, and this is something that we also learned from Nairobi, although their direct delivery methodology was them giving cash to people that constructed, but then based on our policies that we had, we thought it was important that we give the subsidy to what really concerns the utility versus also what the participants, the customers were interested in, which in this case was what they see based on the formative research that we undertook. So basically, like I mentioned previously, the real product is really the underneath, because we had to ensure that we have a substructure that protects the underground water, which is a key commodity for Lusaka Water. And then in terms of delivery mechanisms, based on the number of lessons that we learned, I think that's mostly coming from Ghana as well as Kenya, was the fact that previously as a utility would still build capacity in the communities, train them, and then ask them to construct the toilets in the community, and the hope of that's being scaled up. So based on some of the key lessons that we learned through our partnership and also the mentee program, was the fact that we had to look at alternatives. Right now, we have two different contracting methods where we have community-based methods that we've trained to construct the facility based on the requirements that we want, and then also the local contractors that engage the local community to provide these facilities. In terms of FSM, we've had very good lessons, especially from Senegal around and Kampala around how they engage the private operators to engage in pit emptying. So in the case of Lusaka, we have what we are calling performance-based contracts that are defined through one is a technological neutral, and then the other one is manual-based. We thought this was very important for us to distinguish, and also as a utility, and based on the key lessons we learned from itiquini was the fact that we needed to really explore the partnerships and the private operator, the expertise that the private operators have versus the utility. We conducted a market assessment, and it was very clear from our market assessment that what we were lacking was the pit emptying market that was not fully developed in Lusaka versus the septic tank market. For vacuum tankers, there's already a formal process established where private operators are licensed through our environmental regulator as well as the utility to empty the sludge at our facilities, but we really didn't have a formalized arrangement and partnership with regards to the pit latrines. So from what I said, the market assessment, we had to come up based on some lessons learned, especially from itiquini, to come up with a way in which we are going to entice and also create a partnership with the private operators to empty the pit latrines. So through this, we had to undercut the informal pit emptying by fixing a price to empty, which was like below cost. And then we provide a top-up service to the private operators. And I think this is something that was even earlier alluded to, where we, I think we're mindful of the fact that these are private people, they are business people, and we needed to ensure that we actually provide the finances to them and as and when they are required, and not really following some of the delays that come with having private public institutions involved in. And so through this, we went to tender. We carried out a lot of trainings with the private operators to help them understand how to bid. And then they came up with various prices, bidding prices, and then the household fee, which is also subsidized, was provided. We made sure that this then goes to the private operators for their operational costs, and then the other finance, the top up, has to come through our extra account. We divided also the city. This is something that we also learned about zoning, and also earlier alluded, because currently we are doing on demand, but I think it's very important that we move to scheduled dislodging, especially with the private sector involvement. And these are some of the lessons we've learned through our CWISE platform. So we had to divide like down the city already to allow these contracts to operate in the different areas, and then also ensure that no private operator had 2 or more contracts in one area, just so we can increase the efficiency as well as also the competition among the private operators to stick to our standard operating procedures. So basically, this is a summary of a contract structure that we have with the private operators in pit emptying, where we have an extra account and a verification agent that verifies the work that they have. Something, as I mentioned also earlier, was challenge was the fact that as we engage different partners, it was one thing we had to realize, and also a lesson we drew from itiquini, was the fact that we needed to really build capacity in the utility, so that post the technical assistance period, we had the capacity in the utility to implement these activities and also offer these products and services. And through this, we have a current verification agent that is sitting with what we are calling an FSM unit in the utility, and building capacity to ensure that once that technical assistance comes to an end, the utility is able to take up these responsibilities themselves. And so also we're mindful of the fact that we didn't want to close the utilities' existing structures, and so we had to fit in the new positions in the already existing structures, but then also utilize the existing positions in the utility to ensure that the capacity is just not built on the technical aspects, but as well as through procurement, as well as human resource, and also other important aspects that are actually supported through, that supports the provision of products and services. Previously, I think what we saw, and that this is a lessons we drew, especially when we visited Kampala, we realized that on-site sanitation activities had been instituted. Everyone in the institution understood the role that they had to play with regarding the provision of on-site sanitation facilities. This is a lesson that we had to bring to the utility because, like I mentioned earlier, that we had a dedicated department, and I think in the utility there was that aspect of all low-income activities being associated with that department, but then also not realizing the fact that there are other key officers and also other key services that this department requires in the utility. And so we had to complement and infuse in this department in the existing structure, and also change the job descriptions for other key officers that are already existing in the utility, so that we slowly start to institutionalize the processes and the services that we are offering. And so some of just the lessons we've learned along this journey, especially through partnerships and also peer-to-peer learning, is that building capacity within the utility is very key for the utility to adopt the new norms and programs. And this, like I mentioned, was achieved through a lot of peer-to-peer learning, where we had to take different staff in the utility to visit like Kampala, and also visit other areas like Senegal. And these were non-technical staff, but staff that are providing support services to the technical team that provide these services. And then also partnerships, the private operators, the regulator, and local authorities. Well, we realized that was more effective, and it also avoids conflict. I think this is something that we learned, especially in Senegal, where we saw that there was understanding around each and every stakeholder. What we initially had was the fact that as a utility, we implemented a lot of low-income products and services, but we realized that the regulator had not put in place regulation for these services. And so we realized that we needed to move at the same pace and at the same level, so that as we develop new products and services, the regulator was able to assist us to regulate those products and services. Improved accounting, also service baselines and mapping, monitoring tools to improve decision and use this as resources. I mentioned the fact that I think what initially, what we learned from Durban and also from Kampala, as well as Ghana, was the fact that there was institutionalizing of these activities and not really leaving one department to look at this provision of these products and services as their role. And then also, and I think as previously Eddie alluded to, that change takes a lot of time. It's a lesson, and also just as well as the partnerships to really understand and draw lessons. And also something that we saw was very important was the fact that you can draw very good lessons, but it's very important to adapt them to your own scenarios to ensure that they're accepted within the utility as well as the people that you're working with. And then also providing products and services to low-income areas require subsidies and very well-defined partnerships, especially with the private sectors. And these lessons, I think, was mostly drawn from the lessons and the visits that we undertook to Senegal to see how they are working with the private operators with regards to FSM. Thank you so much. This is what we had to share today. Thanks, Barbara.
Thank you so much, Mwasa, for that presentation. We are on the hour, 4 o'clock, and we're just trying to determine whether we move forward and do, instead of doing the breakouts, we stay here and just have a conversation. Francesca, please advise me.
Yes, indeed, we are at the full hour. It was really rich inputs. Thanks to everyone. Since we haven't engaged so much with the audience yet, I would suggest we move to the session page, and everyone who would have a couple of minutes to stay longer and ask the questions directly to the speakers, we can now move to the follow-up breakout rooms where you can kind of meet the speakers and they can meet you. I will share my screen now to show you how to get there, but I also posted the link in the chat because you have to go to the session page. Where you are right now is the watch live, the stage, but you can go to the program and then filter for our day today. go to this card, which is the session page. And here, scroll down and you will find the kind of entrance to the breakout rooms. We have 3 different breakout rooms. Room 1 will be in English, room 2 will be in Spanish, and room 3 in French. And in room 1, you will be able to meet and mingle with Barbara and with Asim as well. In room 2, you will meet Cesar from KSB Brazil if you have any questions on the condominial sewers, and also Jose Luis Martin Bordes, my good colleague. And in room 3, you will meet Dennis Mwanza together with the colleagues from ONA, Senegal, Mohamedou Gouye and Diawa Balde. With that, I think, Barbara, we can do some wrap-up closing words and meet you there, hopefully, in the breakout room soon.
Thank you very much, Francisca, for that. I hope the instruction is clear. Choose your group. Either you are in French, or you are in English, or you are in Spanish, and you get a chance to talk to the speakers and ask them the questions that you have. For now, just to thank all of you for this afternoon. We've had a very rich presentations here. And I think for me, it makes me very hopeful. We've started this journey on city-wide inclusive sanitation. And even though the challenge is very big, we are making those steps, necessary to get us to where we want to be. So let's continue this conversation in the breakout rooms, and we hope to see you again in some of the other sessions. Thank you so much. The link is on the chat. Please go to the link on the chat, and thank you, everybody.
What? Already over? No, we have plenty more options to continue the discussions and peer exchange beyond the Congress.
Tell me more. What are the options?
Well, SHIWOPA membership, for example. By becoming a member of SHIWOPA, everyone can connect to a global alliance of practitioners and experts. There are 2 ways of becoming a member. First, institutional members. Institutions can participate in SHIWOPA's assemblies and are eligible to run and vote in its International Steering Committee elections. Or second, individual members. Individuals can connect and engage with peers in the online SHIWOPA community. We have created a space that allows for networking and easy communication. Meet future WOP partners, stay up to date on project opportunities, and participate in peer-to-peer learning opportunities.
Sounds great. How can I join?
Simply go to www.shiwopa.org and register for free. If you want to know more, you can follow SHIWOPA on social media and subscribe to the newsletter. Thanks for joining the 4th Global TOPS Congress. We'll see you soon.